I want to give a special shout out to all my patrons first. Thank you so much to my Bibliospren, Bibliohowlers, and my Bibliomancers. It means a lot to me that you give me your extra support for my passion and hobby. Hi everyone, Petrik here. I think I can speak safely for every reader who watched my video that we all have so many books in our TBR pile. We all have so many books that we want to read, and it is, sad to say, impossible to get to them all. And it needs to be remembered that despite how much I or other reviewers or content creators love a particular fantasy series or sci-fi series, any books really, but it needs to be remembered that reading taste is always different. And because of that, sometimes the series that I love doesn't click with other readers. That's totally understandable and that's totally okay. But the purpose of today's video is this. There are plenty of amazing fantasy series that I think might require readers to read at least 1 or 2 books before they really decide to give up with the series. I think these series, the 7 amazing series I'm going to mention today, even if some of them are series that I love from the beginning of the series, well, I think these 7 series might require readers to at least read 1 or 2 books before they can reap the rewards. Out of all the books and series that I've read so far, there aren't too many amazing series that really falls into this category. Thinking about it, I think right now I have about 14 or 15 fantasy series that I can confidently think belongs in this category, at least from my experience, from my reading experience. Again, this will differ among readers. And of course, you are allowed to put down a book anytime you want, even though it is still the first book, just the first chapter if you want sometimes, because you know you are in the wrong reading mood for it. But again, the purpose of today's video is to recommend 7 amazing fantasy series and when is the proper time for you to really give up with the series, assuming that the first few books did not click with you. And I think I will start this list with a big one, and that is Malazan, Book of the Fallen by Steven Erikson. This is a 10 books fantasy series and it is massive. Not only it is massive, but it is also arguably one of the most complex, intricate, and epic fantasy series out there. When we're talking about top 10 or the top fantasy series of all time, it is most likely you will see the name Malazan, Book of the Fallen being mentioned. But every time I try to recommend this series, I always recommend that I think you will have to be really committed to this series. And what do I mean by that? Well, do not give up with the series just from reading the first book, Gardens of the Moon. Gardens of the Moon, the first book, can be really intimidating to start. And when it starts, it immediately puts you into this really big battles and you don't know who's fighting who, you don't know all the names, and then names and all that keep popping up. And so it is definitely required for you to know that when you're jumping into this series, do know that it is okay to not understand everything. Even if you read through all the 10 book series, you will still not understand everything. This is the kind of epic fantasy series that will require you to actually do a reread probably multiple times to actually understand all the intricacies. But if you're diving into this series for the first time, here is my recommendation. Try to read until you finish reading Memories of Ice. This is assuming that you are really committed to try to find out why so many people really love Malazan, Book of the Fallen by Steven Erikson. I think the third book, Memories of Ice, will be the right gauge for you to find out. Now, other readers will recommend it to try up to the second book, Death House Gate, which is another great one. But personally speaking, the first time I read through it, although I think Death House Gate was great, but it has been, sorry to say this, it has been so overhyped that my expectation toward Death House Gates was so overblown. It was so insane that the book just couldn't keep up with my high expectation, my unreasonably high expectations. But it is a great book. Personally speaking though, Memories of Ice was the book that really made me think that, wow, this is absolutely incredible. And because I've read Memories of Ice, the third book in Malazan, Book of the Fallen, and end up falling in love with this one, I consider this one of the best fantasy books of all time. And because I love this one so much, my determination to finish through the rest of the series was pretty much settled. And that's what I did. I finished reading the entire Malazan in 3 months. So that's my recommendation. If you persevered up to the third book, Memories of Ice, and you still, let's say you could not care about anything about it, you feel like it's boring, and for whatever reasons you just found pushing through the rest of the series to be more of a burden than enjoyment, then I think this is the right time for you to put down the series. I do not think the rest of Malazan Book of the Fallen will be for you if you read up to Memories of Vice and it still doesn't give you the immense impact it should do. And for the next series on this list is probably the one where I received the most questions, and understandably because this is one of the series where I recommend the most on this channel and also across all social media, and that is The Faithful and the Fallen by John Gwynne. The first book is Malice, the second book is Valor, the third book is Ruin, and the fourth and final book in the series, in the first quartet of the Banished Land saga, is Wrath. So up to this day, I have received tons of questions saying that, is it worth continuing past Malice? Is it worth persevering through the first half of Malice? Because they felt confused, they felt bored, because it is, understandably, the first book is slow-paced. I will not deny that, but I love that slow pacing. When it comes to reading epic fantasy series, I tend to love a slow-paced beginning more than an action-packed one. The majority of my favorite fantasy books actually involve slow pacing at the beginning of the series because that's what I like. I like knowing the characters first. I like feeling acclimated to the world building and also getting to know the characters first before dangers arrive and, well, put them all into disaster and chaos. And that's exactly what is planned in The Faithful and the Fallen. The first book and also John Gwynne's debut novel, Malice, is a setup book. It is a necessary foundational book for the rest of the series to shine. So if you feel bored reading Malice and you do not think like maybe the series isn't worth it and all that, well, this is what I recommend. Try to not give up with the series yet. Try to read and finish Malice up to the end first, and then see whether the end actually compels you or not. Because I know a lot of readers of Malice have agreed that the last quarter and the concluding chapters of Malice was so good. They were engaging and they gave them what they wanted. So my recommendation, my ultimate recommendation is this. Try to read The Faithful and the Fallen up to the second book. Valor. Valor is really where the actions and everything start to take place, and it matters a lot because we have grown to care about all the characters in The Faithful and the Fallen from the beginning in Malice. Malice is there for us to start caring about the characters first before John Gwynne puts them all in danger all the time. No one is safe in The Faithful and the Fallen. Everyone is constantly in danger, and you will see a lot of your beloved characters suffering or even die. That is not a spoiler. This is one of the best aspects of John Gwynne's storytelling. I have actually given the same type of recommendation to plenty of readers who wanted to give up reading Malice, and then I said, if you read the second book, Valor, and it still doesn't interest you, then drop the series. Statistically, I got more gratitude rather than sorrowful goodbye to the series. Plenty of them have thanked me saying that thank you so much for telling them to push to reading Valor, because Valor, after reading Valor, Ruin, and then eventually Wrath, the series still managed to become one of their favorite series despite the rocky beginning in Malice. But personally speaking, once again, I have felt fully invested in Malice since the beginning, and if you end up loving Malice just like me already since the beginning, well, trust me that the rest of The Faithful and the Fallen will be a complete hit for you. So for the next series, unlike Malice, the first time I read this series, wow, I was so disappointed with the first two books, like immensely disappointed, especially the first book. I'm talking about the Riyria Revelations by Michael J. Sullivan. The Riyria Revelations consists of 6 books divided into a trilogy of omnibus now published by Orbit Books. And the Riyria Revelations, back when I was reading it for the first time, it was in January, I think it was in January 2017, if I'm not mistaken. And the first time I read the first book, Theft of Swords, the first omnibus, Theft of Swords, I was just so disappointed. I could not see what is it about this series that actually captured people's attention. People kept saying that it is amazing, it is epic, and then Royce and Hadrian is some of the most beloved characters of all time. I did not get those at all from reading the first 2 books, or the first omnibus. But I persevered. And then in the third book, or let's say the second omnibus, Rise of Empire, I started to see the evident increase in the quality of storytelling, characterizations, and many more. It still hasn't become one of my favorite series of all time back then, and then after I managed to get to the third omnibus, Heir of Navarone, I was mind blown. It was so good. I cannot believe that this actually started from Theft of Swords and so many things were planned from the beginning. It was incredible. It was incredibly well done. A classic modern fantasy done right with elves, dwarves, and of course bromance. Royce and Hadrian actually managed to live up to expectations, and they truly became one of the best duo in fantasy. So if you are reading the Riyria Revelation for the first time and you felt so disappointed with the first two books or the first omnibus, do not feel discouraged. You are not the only one. I know a lot of people, myself included, who feel the same as you. And believe me on this, try to read until Rise of Empire. And I do not recommend this saying that you have to feel that by the time you reach Rise of the Empire, the series have to become one of your favorite series already. But by the time you get to the Rise of Empire, you have to try to see whether there is an increase in the overall storytelling quality for you or not. If there isn't, then well, I think the third book or the first half of the second omnibus is the right time for you to drop the series. But if not, I think you should definitely continue, because everything has been prepared for the third and final omnibus in the series to explode. The Riyria Revelations deliver one of the finest conclusions to a fantasy series I have ever read up to this day, even though I've read this for the first time in 2017. In early 2017 and early last year, I did a reread of Riyria Revelations, and I feel even stronger about this notion now. So yeah, try to read up to Rise of Empire. If that still doesn't appeal to you, then drop the series. And a similar situation can also be applied to the next series I'm going to recommend here, and this is a very popular self-published fantasy series, probably the most popular and successful self-published fantasy series of all time right now, and it is Cradle by Wight. So try to read up to Black Flame, the third book in the series. This is a 12-book series, and each book is pretty short. They're about 200 up to, at most, I think about 400 pages long. The majority of the books in the series actually contain about 300 up to 400 pages. Yeah, it is that short. They are very readable. The language and the prose is easy, but I think it can feel very, well, lacking in quality in the first two books, Unsold and also Soulsmith. They weren't really bad per se, in my opinion, but Unsold and Soulsmith did not, for me, did not show any sign that it would become something truly incredible. It did not show me any sign why Cradle became the most successful self-published fantasy series right now. But after getting to Black Flame, the third book in the series, I finally understood why. And the rest of the series, all of them, all the books in Cradle, all of them were a hit for me. So if you're reading Cradle for the first time, and also the 12th books, which is the final book in Cradle, is slated to be released this year. So if you're feeling like you want to jump into Cradle for the first time, and then after you dive into it, you felt so disappointed with the first two books, I still would highly recommend you to try reading Black Flame first, the third book in the series. And if Black Flame still does not click with you, then drop the series. You don't need to punish yourself reading remaining 9 books in the series. That's still a lot, even though each book contains only about 300 or 400 pages long. 9 books is still a lot of books. And then the next series on this list is another self-published fantasy series, and it is The Bound and the Broken by Cahill. This series will be 5 books long, and currently 3 books and 2 novellas are out. So for this one, try to not let the first book of Blood and Fire discourage you from continuing with the series. Now, the first book is definitely so akin to, let's say, a smorgasbord of classic fantasy books mashed into one. It really felt that way. I still like Of Blood and Fire. I did not feel disappointed with it, but I also wasn't amazed with Of Blood and Fire. And I think that's totally alright, because what's important to me is that whether the rest of the series managed to actually compel me or not, and compel it did. I think I was lucky that I started reading this series not from Of Blood and Fire though. I started reading it from the prequel novella, The Fall, which in my opinion is so much more well written compared to Of Blood and Fire. Of Blood and Fire was good, but The Fall was great. So if you're reading this for the first time, you're reading The Bound and the Broken for the first time, trust me, Cahill is about to become even more popular in the year to come. So if you're reading this for the first time, try to start with The Fall first, just to see the quality of writing in Cahill, to see the potential in his prose and storytelling, and whether the series, the classic modern fantasy style of it, would be suitable for you or not. But my personal recommendation to all of you who are reading The Bound and the Broken for the first time, try to read up to the second book, Of Darkness and Light, because Of Darkness and Light is really where the series started to become amazing. It is amazing. It turns into something incredibly epic, and you know what? If you still do not like Of Darkness and Light, I think it is safe to say that The Bound and the Broken is not for you. And again, just like all the series listed in today's video, that's totally okay. We are, after all, different individual with different reading experience and different preference. But yeah, my recommendation is to try to read Of Darkness and Light, because I think this is really where the series, where The Bound and the Broken started to shine. And the third book in the series, Of War and Ruin, is the biggest one of the series so far, and it is also my favorite in the series right now. And finally, for the last two series on today's list, I will just mention them at the same time because these are both series by the same author, and it is from Daniel Abraham. So you might have known Daniel Abraham from his work on The Expanse, the super popular and incredible sci-fi series, sci-fi and space opera series, The Expanse. Daniel Abraham has been writing in the fantasy genre for a while now, and he has three series now, 3 fantasy series out now, and I've read 2 of them. The first one is the Long Price Quartet, and also the second one is the Dagger and the Coin. And today I want to recommend these 2 series because they are, not only they are criminally underrated, but I think they are worth your time if you can actually push through reading the first book. Whether it's the Long Price Quartet or the Dagger and the Coin, both of them have a relatively weak first installment of their series. Yeah, especially in the Dagger and the Coin, the first book actually it was so close to make me want to DNF the entire series. I was so close to DNFing the entire series, but I managed to persevere, and then the last 30% of the book actually hooked me, and I'm glad I continued with the series. The second book was a huge upgrade over the first book, and the same can also be mentioned for the Long Price Quartet. The second book, A Betrayal in Winter, was again a huge upgrade over the first book, Shadow in Summer. I haven't read the Ki Tamar trilogy yet that started with Age of Ash, but I think that one is a different circumstances because it is a trilogy of standalone books taking place in the same city. But that is not the case with the Long Price Quartet and also the Dagger and the Coin, which is definitely a standard fantasy series, standard epic fantasy series. The world building, especially in the Long Price Quartet, is quite different and unique compared to so many other fantasy series out there. So if you want to read the Long Price Quartet or the Dagger and the Coin, try to read, for both of them, try to read up to the second book first. So for the Long Price Quartet, try to read up to the second book, A Betrayal in Winter, and for the Dagger and the Coin, try to read up to the second book, The King's Blood. If the second book of a series did not click with you, then drop reading the series. Probably Daniel Abraham writing style and storytelling is just not for you. Though I will say this, the Dagger and the Coin, Daniel Abraham's writing in the Dagger and the Coin is the closest to George R.R. Martin I have ever read, out of all the authors I have ever tried so far. And that shouldn't come as a surprise because I think Daniel Abraham is actually a George R.R. Martin student. So these are the 7 series that I think are worth your time, and they might require more of your perseverance than other series, but I think it will be worth your time. Totally, because I love the 7 series, even though, as I said, some of the first book did not click with me, some I love immediately from the first book. But I can certainly recognize that all the 7 series I mentioned on today's video, all of them does not have the finest first book of a series, but the rest are so worth it in my opinion. So hopefully this video will be useful to all of you diving into this 7 great, in my opinion, great fantasy series for the first time, because again, our time is limited. We unfortunately cannot read all the books that we want, and sometimes we have to cut our loss. And if you are interested in reading the 7 series and then you find yourself feeling a bit discouraged and also probably bored with the first book, well, I hope my recommendation and where you should stop with the series will prove to be helpful to you as you navigate through this series. So yeah, that's pretty much it for me today. Do let me know what you think about today's video, and also, do you have any series where you think like the first book was weak but the rest of the series was worth it? Do let me know what they are in the comment section down below. So yeah, as always, thank you so much for watching and thank you for your support. Bye bye. Lastly, I want to say thank you so much once again to all my patrons who keep on supporting me.